Have you ever watched your entire family celebrate your failure? I have. My name is Ethan Carter. And 3 years ago, I lost everything. Or at least, that's what my family thought. At the time, I was 36 years old. I lived in Dallas, Texas. For 12 years, I worked at Carter Construction, my father's company. Or at least everyone called it my father's company. The truth was, I helped build it. I wasn't the face of the business. That was my younger brother, Jason. Jason had the perfect smile, perfect hair, perfect confidence. People loved him. Meanwhile, I was the guy solving problems behind the scenes. When clients complained, I fixed it. When projects fell behind schedule, I fixed it. When money got tight, I worked weekends. Sometimes 70, even 80 hours a week. I kept the company running. But nobody noticed. Especially my father. Growing up, Jason was always his favorite. If Jason got a B in school, Dad celebrated. If I got straight A's, Dad asked why I didn't do better. For years, I told myself it didn't matter. I focused on work. I focused on building something meaningful. Something that would make my family proud. I had no idea how wrong I was. One Friday afternoon, my phone rang. It was my father. His voice sounded cold. Ethan, be at the office at 6. I frowned. Why? We need to talk. Then he hung up. No explanation. No details. Just silence. The entire drive to the office felt strange. Something didn't feel right. When I arrived, the parking lot was almost empty. Only a few cars remained, including Jason's brand new Mercedes. I walked inside. The conference room door was already open. And everyone was there. My father. My mother. Jason. And a lawyer I had never seen before. The moment I stepped into the room, the atmosphere felt wrong. Nobody smiled. Nobody greeted me. My father pointed toward an empty chair. Sit. I sat down slowly. My stomach tightened. The lawyer opened a thick folder. My father folded his hands. Then he looked directly at me. Ethan, we've made a decision. A decision. Not a discussion. Not a meeting. A decision. What kind of decision? I asked. My father took a deep breath. Then said the words that changed my life. You're no longer part of this company. For a moment, I thought he was joking. Nobody laughed. Nobody smiled. The lawyer pushed papers toward me. My heart started pounding. What are you talking about? Jason leaned back in his chair, smiling. That smile told me everything. This wasn't spontaneous. This had been planned. For a long time. My father spoke again. We're restructuring ownership. I looked at the documents. My name was gone. Completely gone. 12 years. 12 years of sacrifice. Erased. Just like that. I looked up. There has to be some mistake. Jason laughed. actually laughed. The sound echoed through the room. No mistake. My hands clenched under the table. I looked at my mother, waiting for her to say something. Anything. She didn't. Instead, she shook her head. Ethan, you need to stop acting like a victim. Victim? The word hit harder than losing the company. Because suddenly I understood. They weren't doing this reluctantly. They wanted this. All of them. My father. My mother. My brother. Every single person in that room had already decided I didn't matter. And somehow, that realization hurt more than anything else. Then my father delivered the final blow. Jason will be taking over. I stared at him. Jason? The same Jason who barely showed up to work before noon? The same Jason who spent more time on social media than managing projects? The same Jason whose mistakes I quietly fixed for years? That Jason? I couldn't believe it. But the lawyer's paperwork said otherwise. The decision had already been made. Behind my back. Weeks ago. Maybe months ago. Every family dinner. Every holiday gathering. Every smile. Every conversation. They had all known. Everyone except me. And that's when I realized something. I wasn't sitting in a business meeting. I was sitting in a betrayal. And I had absolutely no idea that this was only the beginning. I sat there in complete silence. The papers were still lying in front of me. My name. Gone. My ownership. Gone. My future. Gone. At least that's what they wanted me to believe. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. The only sound in the room was the ticking clock on the wall. Tick. 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 Then Jason broke the silence. You should probably sign the documents. His voice was casual. Almost amused. Like he was watching a movie. Like 12 years of my life meant absolutely nothing. I looked at him. Slowly. Carefully. Trying to understand how my own brother could do this. But the answer was sitting right in front of me. Greed. Pure greed. My father cleared his throat. This doesn't need to become emotional. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was unbelievable. Not emotional? The company I had dedicated my life to was being taken away from me. By my own family. And he thought I shouldn't be emotional? I looked directly at him. When were you going to tell me? Nobody answered. That silence told me everything. My mother looked away. Jason suddenly became interested in his phone. My father stared at the table. They knew. And they were ashamed. Not ashamed enough to stop. But ashamed enough to avoid eye contact. Finally, my father spoke. The decision was finalized 3 months ago. 3 months. My chest tightened. 3 entire months. For 3 months, they had smiled in my face. For 3 months, they had pretended everything was normal. For 3 months, they had lied. I slowly shook my head. I can't believe this. Jason rolled his eyes. Oh, come on, Ethan. Don't act surprised. I looked at him. What does that mean? His smile returned. It means Dad finally realized who the real leader is. The room became very quiet. Even the lawyer looked uncomfortable. Because everyone knew Jason wasn't a leader. He was the favorite son. There was a difference. A very big difference. I turned toward my father. Do you actually believe that? My father hesitated. Just for a second. But I noticed. And so did Jason. That's why Jason immediately jumped in. Dad doesn't need to justify himself. I looked back at him. For years, I had covered his mistakes. Protected his reputation. Saved projects he nearly destroyed. And now he was acting like he built everything himself. The irony was almost painful. Jason leaned forward. You know what your problem is, Ethan? I didn't answer. You always thought you were more important than you actually are. The words hit hard. But I stayed calm. That seemed to annoy him. Because bullies expect reactions. They want anger. They want tears. They want a fight. I gave him none of that. Instead, I simply asked, "Is that what you really think?" Jason smiled. Absolutely. Then he added something I'll never forget. If you disappeared tomorrow, the company wouldn't even notice. The room fell silent. My mother didn't stop him. My father didn't stop him. Nobody stopped him. And in that moment, something inside me changed. Not anger. Not hatred. Acceptance. For the first time, I stopped trying to earn their approval. I stopped trying to prove my worth. I stopped believing they would ever see me differently. Because the truth was obvious. They had already made up their minds years ago. I simply hadn't wanted to admit it. The lawyer pushed the papers closer. Mr. Carter. If you're ready to sign. I looked down at the documents. Then back up. And smiled. A small smile. A calm smile. The kind of smile that confused everyone. Jason frowned. What are you smiling about? I slid the papers back across the table. I'm not signing. The lawyer blinked. My father frowned. Jason laughed. Then don't. We already own everything. I stood up. Slowly. Calmly. The room watched me. My father looked irritated. My mother looked disappointed. Jason looked victorious. They thought this was the end of my story. They thought they had won. The funny thing was, I almost felt sorry for them. Because there was something they didn't know. Something none of them knew. A secret my grandfather had taken to his grave. A secret he trusted only me with. I hadn't thought about it in years. Not until this moment. Not until I realized I truly had nothing left to lose. My grandfather had always treated me differently. While everyone else compared me to Jason. Grandpa saw me. Really saw me. He used to say something strange whenever we were alone. Ethan. The strongest people are the ones nobody notices. Back then, I never understood what he meant. Now. I was starting to. I picked up my jacket. My father looked annoyed. Where are you going? I looked at him. Then at my mother. Then at Jason. And finally said, Home. Jason laughed again. The sound echoed through the room. You don't even have a job anymore. I smiled. For the first time all evening. A genuine smile. Because something told me this wouldn't be the last time I saw that confidence. And when it disappeared, it was going to disappear fast. I walked toward the door. Then Jason called after me. Good luck starting over. I stopped. The room became silent. I didn't turn around. I didn't raise my voice. I simply said 5 words. 5 words that would haunt him later. You're going to need it. Then I walked away. And none of them realized that the moment they celebrated my downfall, their own downfall had already begun. Because waiting inside an old safety deposit box was a secret worth millions. And in less than 24 hours, my entire life was about to change. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces. My father's cold expression. My mother's disappointment. Jason's smile. That smile. The one that said he thought he had won. Around 3 in the morning, I finally got out of bed. My apartment was silent. The city lights outside my window glowed against the darkness. Normally, I would have been thinking about work, deadlines, clients. But for the first time in 12 years, I had nowhere to be. No office. No meetings. No company. Nothing. The realization should have terrified me. Instead, it felt strangely peaceful. Like a heavy weight had finally been removed from my shoulders. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a cup of coffee. Then something caught my attention. An old photograph sitting on the counter. It was a picture of me and my grandfather. I smiled. Grandpa Henry. The only person in my family who never treated me like second place. The only person who believed in me before I ever believed in myself. As I stared at the photograph, a memory suddenly came back. Clear as day. I was 24 years old. Grandpa was sitting on his porch, watching the sunset. He looked at me and said something strange. Ethan, one day you're going to discover who people really are. I laughed. What does that mean? He smiled. It means success doesn't reveal character. Loss does. Back then, I didn't understand. Now I did. Perfectly. I looked down at the photograph. Then I remembered something else. Something important. A safety deposit box. Years ago, shortly before he passed away, Grandpa had given me a small envelope. Inside was a key. And a note. At the time, I thought it was sentimental. Nothing more. The note contained only one sentence. If life ever knocks you down, open this. I hadn't thought about it in years. The key was still somewhere in my apartment. I spent nearly an hour searching. Drawers. Closets. Old storage boxes. Finally, I found it. A small silver key. Exactly where I had left it. My heart started beating faster. The next morning, I drove straight to the bank. The entire way there, I kept asking myself the same question. Why now? Why was I suddenly thinking about this? Maybe because I had nothing left. Maybe because losing everything forced me to remember the one person who never abandoned me. The bank employee led me into a private room. A few minutes later, the safety deposit box was placed in front of me. I stared at it, suddenly nervous. Slowly, I inserted the key, turned it, and opened the box. Inside were several documents, a sealed envelope, and a flash drive. I frowned. This wasn't what I expected. I picked up the envelope first. Written across the front were 3 words. For Ethan only. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. My grandfather's handwriting. The moment I saw it, emotion hit me hard. Because for a second, it felt like he was still here. I began reading. Ethan, if you're reading this, life has probably become difficult. I always hoped you would never need what's inside this box. But I knew your heart. I knew you would spend years helping others before helping yourself. That's why I prepared this for you. Not because you're weak. Because you're stronger than anyone realizes. Including you. I stopped reading. My eyes were already watering. Grandpa always knew exactly what to say. I continued. Years ago, I invested in several small businesses. Most failed. A few succeeded. Very few people know about those investments. Not even your father. What started as a few $1,000s eventually became something much larger. Everything legally belongs to you. I froze. What? I quickly turned the page. Then I saw the number. And nearly dropped the letter. I read it again. Then a third time. Sure, I had misunderstood. I hadn't. The amount was real. Very real. Millions of dollars. My grandfather had quietly built an investment portfolio worth more than anything my father owned. And somehow, he had left it all to me. I sat there completely stunned. Unable to think. Unable to breathe. Unable to process what I was seeing. Then I noticed another paragraph. And everything changed again. Ethan, the money isn't the most important part. The flash drive contains information about a company I believed in before anyone else did. If the people running it are still there, meet them. Listen carefully. You may discover your future. My heart raced. I looked at the flash drive. Then back at the letter. Then back at the flash drive again. What company? What future? What had Grandpa discovered? I left the bank carrying a small box. But somehow, it felt like I was carrying an entirely new life. Outside, my phone suddenly buzzed. Jason. Incoming call. I stared at the screen. Then declined it. A second later, another message arrived. Jason, Dad says you still need to sign some paperwork. I smiled. For the first time since the betrayal. Because while they were worried about paperwork, I had just learned something extraordinary. The son they threw away was secretly worth millions. And they still had absolutely no idea. Not yet. But soon. Everything was going to change. For the next 2 hours, I sat in my apartment staring at the flash drive. My grandfather's words kept repeating in my head. Asterisk, the money isn't the most important part. Asterisk. That made no sense. Millions of dollars was life-changing money. How could anything be more important than that? Finally, I plugged the flash drive into my laptop. A single folder appeared. Its name was simple. Horizon Industries. Inside were dozens of files. Business reports. Financial statements. Emails. Meeting notes. Investment records. I opened the first document. Then another. And another. The more I read, the more confused I became. Because Horizon Industries wasn't a giant corporation. It wasn't famous. It wasn't even particularly successful. At least not yet. According to the documents, it was a struggling manufacturing company based in Austin, Texas. For years, it had barely survived. Investors ignored it. Banks avoided it. Most people believed it would eventually fail. But my grandfather clearly disagreed. In fact, he had invested heavily in it. Very heavily. There was also a note attached to the final file. It contained only one sentence. Asterisk, look at the people, not the numbers. Asterisk. I leaned back in my chair, thinking. Then I made a decision. The next morning, I drove to Austin. The company headquarters wasn't impressive. No glass skyscrapers. No luxury offices. Just a modest building in an industrial area. Honestly, it looked ordinary. Maybe even disappointing. Part of me wondered if I was wasting my time. But something told me to keep going. Inside, I asked to speak with the CEO. The receptionist smiled politely. Do you have an appointment? No. She laughed softly. Neither does everyone else. Fair enough. I handed her a business card. Along with a note. Asterisk, grandson of Henry Carter. Asterisk. Her expression immediately changed. She picked up the phone. 30 seconds later, everything changed. The CEO wanted to see me. Immediately. That surprised me. A lot. A few minutes later, I entered a conference room. A woman in her early 40s stood near the window. Professional. Confident. Focused. She extended her hand. Emily Parker. I shook it. Ethan Carter. The moment I mentioned my grandfather's name, her face softened. I owe your grandfather more than I can ever repay. That caught my attention. What do you mean? She smiled. 10 years ago, nobody believed in this company. Nobody except him. I listened carefully. Apparently, when Horizon Industries was close to bankruptcy, my grandfather became one of the very few investors willing to take a chance. Not because the numbers looked good. Because he believed in the people running it. Exactly like the note said. Look at the people. Not the numbers. For the next hour, Emily explained everything. The company had spent years developing advanced construction technology. Technology that dramatically reduced building costs. Recently, several major contracts had been signed. Growth was accelerating rapidly. And according to Emily, the future looked extraordinary. Then she said something unexpected. Your grandfather wanted you involved. I blinked. What? She nodded. He talked about you constantly. I didn't know what to say. Nobody had ever told me that. My grandfather rarely spoke about business around family. Yet somehow, he had been planning for my future. Years before I even knew it. Emily opened a folder. Then slid it across the table. Inside were ownership documents. My eyes widened. According to the paperwork, my grandfather's shares had increased dramatically in value. Far more than I originally realized. Far more. I looked up. This can't be right. Emily smiled. It is. I felt dizzy. The numbers were unbelievable. The inheritance wasn't worth a few $1,000,000. It was worth many times that amount. More than enough to change my life forever. But what happened next shocked me even more.